Hey buddy, how's it going? You wanna record a video? What do you think of the One Piece? Alright, get out of here. We gotta record. Bro, go. Do you ever wonder why the world government let Luffy cook? No. I mean, seriously, why did they let it get this far? He has a literal god-tier fruit, wears the exact same hat as the Pirate King who they made the big spectacle out of executing, and he actually named his entire crew after it. Luffy's out here running wild, punching celestial dragons, burning down world government flags, and somehow they just let him stay in the kitchen. But I don't really think it's a plot hole. I think it might be the point. Because the thing is, in One Piece, the world government doesn't actually exist to fight pirates. The world government can only exist because of pirates. Pretty early on, it's obvious that the people of the One Piece world believe that the Marines protect the world from pirates. Like that all pirates are evil and the world government is their shield. But as we get further into the story, we realize that that's not the whole picture. Like, let's take a second to think about how the world actually works in One Piece. If your island isn't a part of the world government, you have no rights. You don't get protected, you don't get backup, you're labeled lawless, which means it's like open season. And what actually happens to these lawless islands is probably that they get pillaged first by pirates and then saved by the Marines. That is, if they're lucky enough to not become the host site for some celestial dragon slave hunting game. And it's all a setup. It's a tale as old as time. And this apparent need that they have for the world government to protect them is not something unique to One Piece. A long, long time ago in the 16th century, an English philosopher named Thomas Hobbes said that life without government is nasty, brutish, and short. He imagined a world full of fear and violence, where everyone's just trying to not get murdered all the time. To escape that chaos, Hobbes said that people should give up some of their freedom to a big, strong authority, what he named a Leviathan, that keeps everyone safe. Basically, it's like, we'll follow the rules, just please make sure that nobody kills us. Which is pretty much the exact deal the world government offers in One Piece. Pay your tribute, stay in line, and we'll make sure the pirates go away. But the thing is, that threat and that chaos never actually fully goes away. It's maintained carefully and quietly. The pirates in One Piece are never fully crushed because they're useful. Because the moment that people are actually safe from the threat, they might stop needing the world government. It's the theory of German political theorist Carl Schmitt. He basically said that politics is about drawing lines. You pick who's a friend and you pick who's an enemy. That's it. That's the game. And in One Piece, that is a bright red grand line. And the dark part about this philosophy is that Carl Schmitt wasn't just some abstract theorist, he was a literal Nazi. And he used this logic to justify their dictatorship. That's what makes the world government's friend-enemy obsession with pirates feel so eerie. It's straight out of real authoritarian playbooks. You're either with the world government, or you're a pirate, or worse, a revolutionary. There's no true neutral, no safe middle ground. And the world government needs that line because it defines their role. If there's no enemy, there's no need for the Marines, no justification for the celestial dragons, no fear to prop the system up. So the world government is gonna give you the enemy big and loud every chance they get. Pirates are evil, the world government is your protector. Choose your side. Because like Italian philosopher and vocal critic of Benito Mussolini, Antonio Gramsci said, modern power isn't just about force, it's about ideas. The most powerful systems in the world don't just control you by force, they convince you that they are correct. Gramsci called this cultural hegemony, when people agree to their own control because they believe it's natural and right. In One Piece, you see this every time that a citizen says that the Marines keep them safe from pirates. Even when Marines cause just as much damage or the celestial dragons enslave people. This idea of protection from pirates sticks. Because fear makes people cling to order, even a cruel order. And in the world of One Piece, pirates are the perfect tool of fear. Now, when we bring it back to Luffy, all of these theories, Hobbes, Schmitt, Gramsci, it's not just some vibe about world building. I think it actually helps to explain some things that look like they just don't make sense about One Piece. Like, why does the world government let pirate crews rise for years before cracking down on them? And why Luffy, with the most dangerous fruit in the world, got to sail free for so long? The answer isn't that they're dumb or bad at their jobs. It's that the chaos is useful. Not to the average Marine, maybe, not even to Sengoku or Akainu, but to the superstructure that exists exists in this world, to the idea that the world needs the world government. Because if pirates, by and large, are so dangerous, why didn't the world government just end them? As we learn more about the individuals that exist in the higher tier structure of the world government, from Imma to the Holy Knights, we realize that they could have wiped out Luffy when he was setting sail from the East Blue. So why tolerate it at all? And what I'm positing here is that control isn't always the goal. Manageable chaos is better. Like, let's go back to the newly post-Gol D. Roger world. The emperors were consolidating their power, rogue pirates were starting up everywhere, and the Marines were probably stretched pretty thin. And as the great pirate era raged on, what was the world government's response? They built a third power structure, the 7 Warlords. Powerful pirates who worked for the state. Or more accurately, pirates with a license to commit violence, as long as that violence is pointed in the right direction. Official data books even say that this system was designed to balance the power between the world government and pirates. But let's be real, this wasn't about balance, it was co-optation. The Warlords were essentially just pirates with brand deals, publicly condemned but privately protected. And that was a setup that really worked for the world government, because it blurred this line. Like, see, even the pirates will work for us. It let them continue to say that they were keeping the peace, even when those same pirates were ruling countries, enslaving people, or selling weapons on a black market. As long as power balances in the world didn't tip too far, the world government was happy to let the pirates keep the population in fear. That is not peace. It's pacification. But eventually the cracks in the system got too big to ignore. And I think both for this topic and for a lot of the story we see in the One Piece world, Dressrosa was the tipping point. Doflamingo, who was a literal former celestial dragon, was exposed as a tyrant, a warlord, a trafficker, and a true puppet master. Doflamingo himself is the perfect example of like a state criminal, protected when useful, discarded as a villain when the optics demanded a fall guy. Just another patsy in the world government's larger theater. And unfortunately for the world government, this time, people noticed. Fujitora, the rare marine who actually seems to have a moral spine, saw through the whole Pirate Partnership Act and abolished the Warlord system. On paper, it seems like a win for justice, but in reality, it's just the end of the illusion. No more balance, no more buffers. The world government isn't really managing chaos anymore in the story. They're consolidating everything. And look, I don't think this is just Oda being clever with his storytelling, because this is exactly how real world empires behave. Like, let me give you a little example here. The United States has done this exact thing. During the Cold War, the US poured money, weapons, and training into revolutionary armies and insurgent groups. The logic was simple, like, these guys will fight the Soviets for us, so let's help them. In Afghanistan, the CIA famously funneled support to the Mujahideen in the 1980s, at the time saying these were just freedom fighters against the Soviets. But when those proxy wars ended, some of those groups and people evolved into factions that would later align with Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, the same group reported to be responsible for 9/11. This was one of the largest attacks ever on US soil. And the result wasn't some deeper understanding about how our actions in destabilized regions create our enemies. It was the opposite. The Patriot Act. More endless wars, and pumping our already booming military-industrial complex full of steroids. 9/11 was, of course, a very real atrocity, but it was also the perfect pretext for massive military expansion. That's not a conspiracy, that's just the cycle. And it's the same one that we've watched in One Piece. Yesterday's freedom fighters become tomorrow's terrorists. It was, of course, a real atrocity, but it was also the perfect pretext for massive military expansion. And the cycle repeats. In Latin America, in parts of Africa, in the Middle East, paramilitary groups backed by Washington often spiraled into violent regimes or anti-American forces once their usefulness was done. And when that happened, the US pointed to the very same monsters that it helped create as justification for more military expansion, more surveillance, and more wars. It's the same pattern, man. When you're in power, you tolerate chaos. You even fund it when it's convenient. And then if it actually grows teeth, you call it an existential threat. And of course, expand your own power to defend against it. That is the world government's playbook. And in One Piece, it's not just countries or the Revolutionary Army that I'm talking about. People get turned into weapons, scapegoats, and patsies. And I think that no one actually shows this theory better than the King of the Pirates himself. Because the day that they executed Roger, the world government made it seem like the terror of piracy was over. And in a way, he became like the ultimate patsy, a public sacrifice used to prove that the world government was winning, even though his death actually fueled the very chaos they claimed to end. Like, we've seen the scene, he was captured, shackled, head on the block. And before that, they paraded him through Logtown like a prize. They gave him a public execution, a spectacle, symbolic dominance. The world government wanted to say, we won. But of course, Roger smiled, and he dropped the biggest narrative nuke in One Piece's history.
俺の財宝か欲しけりゃくれてやる探せこの世のすべてをそこに置いてきた
In that single moment, Roger of course turned his death into revolutionary fuel. But the thing that is wild to me about this whole setup is that they let him talk. They didn't gag him, they didn't hush the crowd or shut the guy up who asked the question about the One Piece. Because if they really killed off piracy, if they executed Roger and snuffed out all the pirates in the world, they would kill off the major reason for their existence. And years later, they kinda tried again. Ace was revealed to be Roger's son and then became a living legacy. He was caught, and he was given another major execution event. And this time the anti-piracy spectacle was bigger than ever. And eventually it was even streamed in 4K. Whitebeard and Luffy pulled up, the world watched, we all know the rest. But while Ace still died and Whitebeard was short behind, the world saw Marineford burn. It looked like the world government had barely won. In fact, they were kind of saved by Shanks that day. They hadn't crushed piracy with this execution or even come close to it, but they did remind the world how fragile it all was. So let's be honest, they used Ace as bait. They wanted a war. They wanted to get out the message. And unfortunately for them in this, there's just one wild card. You know the guy. He inherited Roger's will, wears his hat, ate the fruit that the world government literally tried to hide from world history. It's our guy Luffy. And let me reiterate this again. There was a god fruit stolen from the world government that ends up being eaten by a kid in the East Blue, the same sea Roger was from. And then he ends up wearing the Pirate King's hat, names his crew after that hat, and has openly declared war on the world government. And they just let it happen for years. At first I started getting suspicious, like, shit, they're incompetent. But it's not incompetence, it's utility. And I think the logic is that Luffy is dangerous. Yeah, of course he is. But he's also kind of ideal for the world government story. He's chaotic, he breaks things, he's the second flashiest person in the world, and he's really easy to blame. When Luffy punches a celestial dragon, that's headlines, baby. When Luffy burns Eni's lobby to the ground, that's pouring fuel on the fear fire. And when Luffy jumps into Marineford screaming for Ace, it's peak cinema. And yet they never really seem to actually try to kill him. Not until Wano, when he awakens his fruit, and when the idea of him maybe started becoming too big to control. Because that's kind of the thing about Luffy, is he's not just strong. He's liked. He inspires and connects people and makes them question the narrative. And because we're watching the story from his perspective, he's like Roger with way, way better PR. What I'm getting at is that sometimes I think the world government doesn't try to fight pirates at all. Sometimes it's like they're hiding behind them. Because think about this. If you wanted to wipe an island or a country off the map, how would you do it? How would you kill its population, erase its history, and silence every witness, while still coming out looking like the good guy? It's simple. You blame pirates and revolutionaries. Or better yet, you blame some general amorphous evil that you're at war against, like lawlessness. Which is kind of exactly what happened at my favorite example I think I use in every video, which is Ohara. They're just an awesome island of archaeologists with the coolest library I've ever seen. And so what? They started digging into the Void Century, connecting some dots the world government maybe wanted to be left alone. But what the world government did was bring in the big guns. Buster call time. And the official reason is that they were committing the crime of illegal research. And this is a classic false flag dynamic, calling it illegal research. Frame it as a threat to public safety. Because if you frame it as a threat to public safety, you can wipe an island off the map under the banner of law and order. Ohara wasn't a military target, it was a historical threat. A reminder that the world government story has holes in it. So they burned the library to the ground and said they were keeping everyone safe. And then let's fast forward to Egghead. Vegapunk, the smartest and ugliest man alive, started asking those same questions. He started connecting those same dots. He starts talking about Joy Boy, Nika, the Void Century. And just like that, he's marked for death. Not tried in a courtroom or in the court of public opinion either. Not exiled and told that he can't be a part of society or have his funding cut off. Erased, murdered, killed, whatever you want to call it. And when Saturn, Kizaru, and the Seraphim destroy an entire island, say it was the pirates. Wasn't Luffy there? It's easy. It's clean. It's believable, because that's what the world government is best at, controlling the frame. They don't stop every fire. They just make sure you don't know who lit the match, because that's the trick. The world government never admits what it does. It just makes sure that you're looking in the wrong direction when it happens. And that's what makes the system so effective, both in One Piece and our world. You can label a pirate a terrorist and kill him, can execute him, chase him, put a bounty on their head. But as an average person, how do you fight a government that uses your fear to justify anything? Well, they want you to say that you don't. You just survive it. And that's what most people do. Maybe not because they want to believe the story, but because it's cleaner that way. It's safer. It's easier to sleep at night. But once you see this pattern, man, you can't really unsee it. So let's take a step back. Everything we've talked about, the pirates, the executions, the balance, the cover-ups, none of it needs some shadowy figure pulling the strings. This isn't some major conspiracy. It doesn't need Imma pulling the strings and orchestrating everything to a T, because it's a structure, a self-sustaining cycle that ensures the world government is always necessary. Not because it prevents chaos, but because it knows how to use it. The world government doesn't plan everything. It hasn't planned all of the piracy that exists in the One Piece world. It just makes sure that it always benefits from it. And that, my friends, is structural opportunism. The system isn't broken at all. It is built this way. And guys, this shit is terrifyingly efficient. And what makes Luffy different is that he doesn't just break the rules of this structure. He refuses to play the game entirely. He doesn't conquer kingdoms. He doesn't control territories in any traditional way. He doesn't spread fear at all. He just sails, helps his friends, laughs, eats, and people follow him. He's the most liked pirate since Roger, probably, maybe ever. I don't know, Joy Boy and Nico were probably pretty like, but that's beside the point. But Luffy's hat, to me, it's not just great fashion, it is a reminder that the system didn't create Luffy, that people can love something outside of the world government story, and that freedom and safety does not need a marine escort. Okay, I know this has been long, but remember Gramsci, the guy who said the power is strongest when it convinces you it's natural? There's this legal idea called the state of exception. It's when a government suspends laws during an emergency, which is essentially doing something awful, suspending the laws for the greater good. In One Piece, the world government lives in a permanent state of exception, always cracking down, always making exceptions, always justifying new violence. But Luffy's like the exception to the exception. He's the proof that a different world is possible. And the world government allowed him to operate to help maintain the world's chaos and their place in their little superstructure. And now that it's gotten this far, we can see that they don't know if they can continue to control it. So again, we come back to the start. Why did they let Luffy cook? Why didn't they stop him when he got that fruit at the very beginning? Or after he declared war on them at Eni's lobby? Why have they yet again let the Straw Hat become a global icon? Well, because for a long time they needed it. They needed the threat, the fear, and the chaos. And in their hubris, they thought they could control him. And to me, that is the point. That's the takeaway. This isn't just a One Piece thing. It's how governmental power works in our world. It creates or allows enemies, amplifies fear, then sells you protection from the very danger it helped nurture. In One Piece, that's pirates. In our world, it's terrorists or dissidents. Or even if it's not connected to violence, it's immigrants or refugees, people fleeing their homelands from conflicts that are often the direct cause of countries like the United States, who come to our country for a better life and are villainized. Once you start seeing these patterns, you can't unsee them. And maybe that's the real power of stories like One Piece. They're not hitting us over the head with this stuff. Oda's not the one quoting Hobbes and saying this is what the message of One Piece is. But they do consistently show us how fear is manufactured and how easily we can mistake chaos for necessity.